And a very good afternoon, everybody. Welcome in to another edition of the Philly Fame Legends. I'm your host, James Scorza, with you. And joining me here today, and with me as always, is a group of companions on this very important Wednesday. Joey Marks, what's going on, brother? And also, we got someone to talk about today that's not named the Dallas Cowboys, but it's somebody that we all love in this town.
Well, James, if I were to tell you Dallas, what's the first thing that comes to mind is
The
Cowboys.
Cowboys. Yeah.
But who else in this city has the first name Dallas?
Hmm.
Huh.
Dallas
Dallas
Goddard? No.
Goddard. Oh, right. Okay. But before Dallas Goddard made the first name Dallas infamous in Philadelphia, Dallas Green
Yes, sir.
made the name infamous. And no, he didn't play football, but the man
But there
was.
was a green in his name, so it was kind of, you would have thought it would have been an eagle.
Yeah, and it would have been appropriate, but he had enough toughness. He had enough toughness and grit to maybe take a chunk out of someone's ass. That's for damn sure.
Yeah.
Um, Dallas Green was one of those managers for the Phillies, especially in recent histories. And we'll get to his playing career in a minute, but just to highlight a little bit, Dallas Green was one of those guys that you knew when he was in the room and you understood it. So much so that he was a guy who took this Philadelphia Phillies franchise to a World Series championship when really a lot of people didn't know if they were going to be able to cross the finish line.
Hmm.
So to Dallas Green, it was kudos. Now, in in retrospect, Dallas Green was drafted by your Philadelphia Phillies and he came from the University of Delaware. Now,
Hmm.
here's the interesting thing. Dallas did play another sport. It wasn't football, though. Can you
Hmm.
guess what sport it was?
Well, I mean, hockey wasn't relevant back then like it was, so I'm guessing it wasn't hockey. So maybe I have to go with basketball?
Yes.
Hmm.
It was a dual sport athlete in the University of Delaware for basketball and baseball. It was a right-hander pitcher that came into the Phillies organization in the 1960s. He lasted 7 seasons with the Phillies.
Hmm.
This is a guy that, I mean, you knew that this guy had, it's what we like to call mean mug. Like
Oh.
he would step into that pitcher mound and you just knew. Like he would mean mug that batter that usually it's the batter that mean mugs the pitcher and scares the living daylights out of the pitcher. No, Dallas Green was like, I'm going to start the intimidation game first and foremost.
Hmm.
So, my question to you first, James, is when I bring up the name Dallas Green, we're going to just go through this as an overview. What's the first thing that comes to mind?
Oh man, I mean, the thing with Dallas Green is like in a way, it's kind of like what's missing in this day and age of baseball is that he was an old school approach. I mean, he was one guy that will set up a lineup from 1 to 9 every game and figure out, okay, this is my lineup for 1 to 9. And back then, pitchers were, I would say pitchers, I mean, back then, I think both NL and AL had pitchers in the 9 hole, obviously. To me, it's one of those things that really surprises me the most that's missing in this day and age of baseball is that, especially like we talked about over and over and over again with analytics and velocity. The thing that I was really the thing that reminds me so much of Dallas Green's mentality is it's kind of like what the Phillies have nowadays with Rob Thompson, and the same thing with the Phillies had back with Charlie Manuel. The thing that's really surprises me the most about it is that he was like somebody that was like a like will also like will respect you as a player and also want you to play your heart out every single night. It's the same thing with Mike Schmidt when he was. I can tell you right now, Mike Schmidt became a better player because of him. Larry Boa became a great player. Gary Maddox, Greg Luzinski, the Bull, all of that. So I have to say right now, I think that the one thing that Dallas Green wanted to, I mean, especially when they won that World Series back in 1980, like it was kind of like every fan in Philadelphia were like we finally we finally reached the top. Finally reached the top, like the Eagles were back in 2017 when they won that first Super Bowl. It's like once we finally win it all, like once we make it, we all make it. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. So I think Dallas Green was ahead of his time. Now, he's
Mm.
considerably a modest pitcher with a basically a 500 record
Mm-hmm.
and a 4.68 career ERA with about little less than 300 strikeouts underneath his belt. So it's not anything to write home about. But the thing that made Dallas Green ahead of his time was he was 6'5".
Wow.
And so that might not shock too many of you out there listening, like, of course, it's five, it's like it's a pitcher, of course. But back then in the 60s,
Mm-hmm.
50s, early 60s, 6'5" guys that pitched did not grow on trees like they do now.
No, they didn't. No, you're
They
right.
were a rare commodity. And we're going to go through a little bit of the technique in this. So, one of the reasons why a taller pitcher is more effective sometimes is two reasons, two major reasons, at least in my mind. It's the intimidation factor. We already brought up about how he intimidated people when he was on the mound. Number two, the idea that when you, depending on how your windup is and your delivery is, when you release the ball is closer to the plate.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have something with filthy movement or velocity did not really exist quite as much then as it does now, but movement mattered. And so if you release the ball later and closer to the plate, all of a sudden that batter he predicts, okay, it's going to be here, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not, and there's a lot of swing and misses,
Right.
or there's a lot of ground balls. There's a lot of instances where Dallas Green, even if he was modest, was ahead of his time. And that's why we kind of put him on this legendary status, not just because of his managerial career, but because of what he meant as far as, ahead of his time, ahead of the curve, before all these, now you have to be a certain height to have be a pitcher in majors. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to see 5'9", 5'10" pitchers as much anymore. You're
Right.
going to see 6'2", 6'4", 6'5", and in some people's cases 6'8". Like you're going to have these giants, and they're taking on a bit of the Dallas Green role.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're going to move forward. Later, Dallas would leave the Phillies, later come back. He left in 1964, and in 1965 he joined the Washington Senators, not the Washington Nationals, James, but in that Washington Senators. And so then he stayed there for a short stint and then eventually made his way to the New York Mets. After the New York Mets, he came back to the Philadelphia Phillies organization and was their head of the farm system, basically recruiting, scouting, and helping to develop young talent. Now, in the early 70s, you're talking about young talent like a Mike Schmidt. You're talking about guys that are coming up the system in the pipeline later for that 1980s World Series run. Later on, the organization saw that, and Danny Ozark, who had since been fired in 1979, was later replaced with Dallas Green. So here's the thing: Dallas Green wasn't just this prototypical manager, and it's the oh so what kind of movement. Like oh so what, he replaced and won a World Series. What makes Dallas Green such a different legendary manager? James, I think we have a couple film clips about what may make Dallas Green a little bit more of a familiar and very relatable manager.
Yeah, Joe. And also the thing, there's a lot of things here that Dallas Green did very well. Especially is that the one thing is for sure that when there was a disagreement like this video shows us right here, is that sometimes when there was a little bit of a disengagement or a little bit of a disagreement and so on and so forth, it was just like there was a cause for concern, as you can see right here. Pete Rose arguing along with Ruben Amaro Sr., now Ruben Amaro Jr., and then there's Dallas Green in the background arguing with the manager. And I mean, this was a different approach than it was right now, and he was arguing all those kinds of things that even though like the umpire called him out or something like that, Dallas Green was completely one of those guys that no matter what the circumstances is and no matter what the occasion might be, is that he always like. I mean, the thing about it, and then now you see him kicking some sand, all that. And I mean, this was a different kind of mentality than it is now, especially with the day and age of baseball. Is that Dallas Green, one of those guys that just sat there. I mean, if you disagree with him and you're an umpire, you're gonna probably get, pardon my French, but you're gonna get your ass taken to you. So, I mean, that's gonna be the thing that I would say about Dallas Green, is that it kind of has that feel about Charlie Manuel in the late 2000s when he was arguing balls and strikes and all that too, and he was in the umpire's face and all that too. I mean, this is old school mentality of Dallas Green. Also not Dallas Green, old school baseball back in the day. That if you disagree with the umpire, you had to. I mean, that's what's missing in this day and age of baseball too, especially with the disengagement and also with the disagreement. Obviously, you think about the replay, the challenges, and all that too. That's probably what took away the baseball repertoire of arguments. I mean, we're checking out this replay one more time by Pete Rose. So there was a. It looks to me there was one runner that scored, and it looked like there was another one, and then Pete Rose, or they called him out. Actually, no, they called one of the players out, and then Pete Rose was trying to go back to first and second, and apparently it looked like it was like either interference or something, and then Pete Rose was really PO'd about that. He was trying to ask like, why was I out? And then Ruben Amaro goes berserk, and then Dallas Green going berserk too. So Joey, that's what's missing in this day and age of baseball, especially with challenges and all that. But overall, that's probably what kind of a tone setter Dallas Green was as a manager, and let alone as a basically as somebody that probably the worst enemy to be an umpire too.
Yeah, and like that's the thing. If me and James, we grew up in this fan base, but for those that may be watching who don't completely realize it, yes, you've heard all the bad stories and all the good stories. Okay, fine. But this is the temperament that at the time was Philadelphia, was the Philadelphia sports fan. We felt like we were getting constantly screwed.
Yeah,
So we got
definitely.
angry. And, you know, to have a manager like go apoplectic and was known for saying very choice words, very choice four-letter words to umpires and to other opposing players and stuff like that. This is a guy who's the epitome of a manager sticking up for his players
Yep.
and not even just going to war for his players, but to sit there and be the catalyst of saying, okay, you're not going to railroad my team. That just because they wear the red pinstripes instead of the navy blue pinstripes, that doesn't mean a damn thing to me other than that this game gets called right down the middle the way it should be. I mean, right, I don't know if Dallas Green would be able to handle robot umps because he
No.
would go up and argue and be like, the ump's like, I'm just doing what the computer told me to do, sir. I'm just doing what the computer told me to do, sir.
Yeah, it'll be a little bit. It'll be a big scene for umpires. Especially, I mean, the day and age of Dallas Green with the arguments that he'll have. I mean, especially with robot umpires. I mean, it's something. I don't think maybe like Charlie Manuel or maybe I mean Topper is in this day and age. I mean, if this was like, no, I mean, if Dallas Green, let's like make hindsight being 2020 here and think of if Dallas Green actually could actually be considered to be like in this day and age of baseball when there's like challenges and this, that, and the other. I don't think he'll do well with the day and age of baseball like it was back then because obviously it was a different game. I mean, that's what I think.
Yeah, and you talk about that passion, right?
Yeah.
With what he had as a manager for the Phillies. And in 1989, he went to another passion in Sports City to become part of the general manager. He took another role. Now, let's follow the progression of what Dallas Green so far has gone to. He's
Mm-hmm.
gone from player to farm manager and player development to manager of a major league ball club to general manager. And that general manager was in 1989, where he became the general manager for the Chicago Cubs. And, James, we know the Chicago Cubs to have broken the curse and, all of that by now.
Mm-hmm.
But in 1989, though, that team was so jaded, almost as jaded as the Phillies were. And so you have to understand in that retrospect, bringing a guy like Dallas Green to that organization to try and help, and him utilizing his skills that he had done as a farm director with the Phillies organization and a manager, later on in the majors. This was a moment where I think the Cubs were like, okay, this is the guy that not only identifies or can identify with our fan base, but also can identify with our struggles, because and is the right man to do both. Is the right man to pick the right talent and to put the right talent in the right position, to hire the right manager with the right intensity and all of that. Now, that was for not for a certain time, but my question to you, James, is from what you know about Dallas Green, and what you know of Chicago sports and the Chicago Cubs more specifically,
Mm-hmm.
do you feel like that was a good do you feel like that was a great fit for him in the Chicago Cubs organization?
Well, it's interesting, especially after he had that type of year, especially back 9 years ago when he captured the first World Series to be as a Philadelphia Philly. But um, the thing that really surprises me the most is that after he had the level of success here, like he continued to have that same level of success with that Cubs team back in '89. And I think the thing that really surprises me the most is that even when he moved on, and obviously it was a sad day if I was a Phillies fan here, sad to see him go and all that. But overall, he's still probably, I mean, to this day, even though he tragically we lost him a few years ago, he's still probably one of the best. He's probably one of the guys that people still compare and contrast to this day, obviously. Because I'm not gonna lie to you, there's a lot of uh basically this day and age of sports in the Philly sports scene. You think about old school mentality, like a Vic Fangio has that same kind of feel that Dallas Green brought in that same kind of scenario too. But overall, I'm the one thing I was really happy to see is that even when he was still around and he was still talking about the day and age that the Phillies, like how much that World Series meant to him back in 1980. I mean, those are the memories that I will never forget what he did for this team, and especially to get that team over that hump back in 1982.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing that I can say is he may not have gotten the Cubs across the finish line, but he
Mm-hmm.
got them to a division title. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's not a sneeze, and they hadn't had one in decades prior to him getting there. So
Yeah.
he also, we talked about some of the players that he notable players that he possibly worked with in the farm system with the Phillies, like a Mike Schmidt. Not necessarily the same, but if you ask a Chicago Cubs fan, it's kind of the same. He also helped develop, bring in, draft, and develop Ryan Sandberg, who later on would go on to be a Philadelphia Phillies manager
Yeah.
per Dallas Green's recommendation.
Hmm.
So the idea that Dallas Green has ties even when he left Philadelphia,
Mm-hmm.
he brought to the Cubs this idea of we're going to do it the Phillies way. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
do it the Philly way. And it's not that he was trying to disrespect the Cubs nation or Cubs fan base, but that he was trying to explain this has worked. So we're going to try to maneuver it in such a way where it fits the mold for Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
but it's similar than what I did in the Phillies. Now, he also had two short stints with the Yankees under George Steinbrenner, which You got to know that that was probably tumultuous to have a guy who in George Steinbrenner who doesn't like to be talked back to. I mean, you know this from your Seinfeld watching days.
Yeah.
Like the idea that he's not one to be talked back to or told what to do and all that. And Dallas Green is not one to be the yes man. So he
Well,
went from
well, speaking of Seinfeld, if he was responsible for the Jay Buhner trade, I can probably ask if that maybe or Ken Phelps and all that too. So I
yeah.
mean, a little pun there about like about
Well,
why the Yankees traded Jay Buhner for Ken Phelps.
he went from Brooklyn to Queens. He went
Yeah,
from the Yankees to the Mets, and with the Mets, he just walked into a bad situation from start to finish, from top to bottom.
right.
It wasn't a good and well-rounded roster, and the ownership expected him to do more with less, and simply wasn't able to do it. Later on, he would move on. Well, let me ask you this real quick
Sure,
before we move on. So
sure.
there's a trend that I'm starting to see. Philadelphia and New York Mets are intertwined with certain players. Why do you think that might be?
Hmm. Well, it's interesting. Like I said, like it's a good question to have, especially. I mean, the Mets and Phillies are like Cowboys and Eagles. Like they like whoever goes to the Met. I mean, not saying that every. I mean, Zach Wheeler is a good example of that. I mean, he came from the Mets and he's actually done a great job. But usually, if the Phillies player comes to the Mets from the Mets, it's kind of like or the Mets like it's like opposite direction. It's like sometimes they don't do very well with their rivals.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dallas, to me, he meant grit. Like, I don't think I knew what that meant until I seen Dallas Green, like, and the way he carried himself as a
Hmm.
manager. And the fact that you look at some of his resume and some of the people he helped develop into stars, guys like Mike Schmidt, Ryan Sandberg,
Yep.
just to name a few, that are on their respective teams' wall of fame. Like and probably will go down in their fan bases, like top four players of all time.
Hmm.
And like that is sometimes you're the engine, you're the engineer, and sometimes you're the teacher.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we focus so much on who the engineer is that we forget who the teacher is, because
Right.
the teacher is the one that gets the product ready or gets the engineer ready before it's time to put that product out there for everyone to see.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, for me, Dallas Green was a teacher. Now, he also taught
Could be a
something.
lot. It's I mean, life coach is a good example of that too for others too.
Yes, absolutely. And like one of the things that Dallas Green started to teach and take up later in his life, closer to 2009, was gun violence. And one of the reasons for that was because his 9-year-old daughter was tragically killed in a Tucson shooting. And so you got to understand, from a person who has a daughter who's 4 years old, when you are put in a situation where you lose a child at that young of an age, and in that kind of situation,
Hmm.
it makes you, and you already are a passionate enough of a man, like Dallas Green already was.
Hmm.
It doesn't take much to push that over the edge to make you want to, stick your neck out to make sure that gun violence is metered. And we're not going to get into politics on this show, but we will say that this is part of, what made that, like how the maturation of his career. He went from player to farm system player, progression specialist, to manager, to general manager, to gun advocate, to safety advocate
Hmm.
in his community. And he used his passion to kind of be a driving force for all of that.
Hmm.
And I think that that is something that, as you had said in past episodes, James, it's something that's missing in the sport today. Is that it's okay that you have all this skill. But if you look like you're a robot walking up to the batter's box, or you're looking like a robot walking up to the pitching mound, you don't look. It's not relatable.
Yeah.
Dallas Green was relatable to this
Hmm.
fan base, to Chicago's fan base, to people that are defending gun violence around the country even to today.
Yeah.
That there's so much that Dallas Green's legacy and legendary life kind of set in motion. Um
Yeah.
what do you have to say about that, James?
Yeah. I mean, this is probably one of the toughest topics, especially when you think about the day and age of shootings and all this stuff. I mean, it's one of the things I try to keep it a little hush hush about it. Not gonna lie to you, but at the same time, I applaud Dallas Green for doing that. What he did, especially with the tragedy of his granddaughter back in 2011, because at the time like it was like something that wasn't addressed, and it still hasn't been addressed. And the thing that is really sad is that we continue to ignore it. We continue to ignore what the real situation is, and sometimes it really makes me upset to see, like, even like I hear these shootings and hear all this other stuff, and I know we got to keep it sports related here, but sometimes, I mean, it takes away from that sports feel, especially when you hear like a Dallas Green lose his granddaughter, or like somebody like close to you, like that's a really nice person, and then somehow in some way some nut job just does something
Yeah.
like that, and it's. I mean, I know I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I also don't want to go away leaving the people who think that everything is okay in this world, because it's not.
And like that's what I think is a good take, is the positive takeaway, is Dallas Green made it a point that after that kind of tragedy, that he made it a point to put his passion that he's had for decades of his
Hmm.
baseball career, and it's where sport and life collide.
Hmm.
And it's a game, and that's something that's been said countless times. It's a game, yes, that's true, but how you approach that game is probably a prototype of how you approach real life.
Hmm.
And I think in Dallas Green's perspective, that is very true. And it also, when you have a player like Dallas Green and a person like Dallas Green, and you can embody what the city is, who the city is. Yeah, he came from Delaware. And in parting notions, he passed away in 2017.
Hmm.
But, he was inducted into the Delaware State Hall, Sports Hall of Fame. He was inducted into the Phillies Wall of Fame. Like, this is a guy that not only deserved those accolades, that deserved those, that recognition, but he embodied what people going forward are going to have to live up to.
Hmm.
People that come from Delaware, they're gonna baseball players have to live in that same category as Dallas Green.
Hmm.
You have that to live up to. And as
Yeah.
Phillies fans, I don't think it's 2025. I don't think one Philadelphia fan has lost the fire that someone like Dallas Green amplified
Hmm.
in his managerial career, in his playing career, and even in his advocacy career.
Hmm.
So to all those people out there that advocate and to who play the sport and want to get into the sport, listen. My advice to you is Dallas Green is a good prototype to live your standard.
Hmm.
You live it with a passion. You live it by how you feel, and you wear it as it is, and you don't hold any regrets to what other people might think of you. You
Hmm.
know, people probably thought Dallas Green was, an a-hole. People that played against him, people that managed against him.
Hmm.
I can imagine that that's true, but here's the difference. You can't argue his resolve. You can't argue his passion.
Hmm.
And that is what Dallas Green had in boatful.
Hmm.
Um, Before we get out of here, I want to say thank you to James for producing the show. That's number one. Number two, I want to encourage everyone out there that's watching this program. If you like what you've watched and if you want to watch more, hit that like and subscribe button on Stream Punk Entertainment PA and on our sister station, Hardcore Sports Network. But for now, I'm Joe Marks. That's James Scorza. Please, everyone out there, be safe and let's go, Phils.
See you later. Be kind.